Daniel Sports Central, we go over our 2022 college football predictions for the Kansas State Wildcats, team that went 8-5 overall in the 2021 season. Overall, good season for K-State, but how this team be in 2022, and whether or not this team is a potential Big 12 dark horse in the 2022 season is what we'll be going over here today. We'll be analyzing this team and breaking their schedule game by game in this video, starting out with your team trends. K-State 8-5 last season. They're 3-3 in their first 6 games, 5-2 in their last 7. So this team did have a better record towards the end of the season versus the beginning here, but I mean, overall, this team was, I would say pretty overlooked in the Big 12 last season, getting up to 8 wins. They beat LSU 42-20 in their bowl game. This was a good team last season. Took a couple of close losses, but this was, I'd say, a pretty good team here last season, and that's why, we'll get into more about why I think this team could be a potential dark horse contender in the Big 12 this upcoming season just a bit here. But looking at 2021, lost to Oklahoma 31-37, kept that game close. You usually play it really close up to the Sooners there. You've pulled some big upsets against them in the past and recent history, but did lose that game there by 6. Beat TCU 31-12. That was a good win. Beat West Virginia 34-17. Lost to Baylor 10-20. Couldn't get anything going offensively there. And lost to Texas in the last game of the regular season 17-22. Certainly, both those Texas and Oklahoma games were both very winnable. If you look at those two in particular, they were both very close. And in the end, both teams were good football teams last season too. So you can't forget, K-State, this team competed right up next to several really good football teams last season. If you look at their losses otherwise, they did lose to Oklahoma State there back in week 4. They also lost to Iowa State. That Iowa State game was extremely winnable, but the Cyclones ended up beating them in the end as well. So, obviously, once again, your bowl game beating LSU 42-20. Looking forward to 2022, there are a few big changes for this team. Most of them, I'd say, being to this team's benefit. Skylar Thompson, of course, the experienced longtime quarterback for the Wildcats, he is gone. He's been around for a while now. Skylar Thompson, he played for this team consistently for 5 years since 2017. So he is gone. That's going to be an adjustment. But really, his stats weren't incredibly, they weren't incredibly great in 2021. He threw 2,100 yards along with 12 touchdowns, 4 picks. And he's not even really that much of a dual threat quarterback, so he didn't really, rush all that much last season either. He also, his completion rate was good, nearly 70%, but, nothing too outstanding out of Skylar Thompson in 2021. But you got Adrian Martinez coming in, the former Nebraska quarterback, which Adrian Martinez is a very polarizing quarterback. His stats have been okay. He's a dual threat quarterback. He can rush. He can actually run it very well, but the problem with him is, when it comes down to close game situations, when it comes down to a point where, you need to play well and you can't turn over the ball, he turns over the ball, he makes some sort of mistake, and that's why Nebraska was 3-9 last year, was because Adrian Martinez makes a big mistake in crunch time, and, that's why all those close games ended up being losses, was because, a big part of that was Adrian Martinez making terrible decisions and big mistakes in the wrong times. And so Adrian Martinez, he's going to have to fix that up and play a lot better. And he's just not a very clutch quarterback, you could say. So Adrian Martinez, he's got talent, he's got potential, but we'll see how he does transitioning to a different school. I think that's honestly a really good thing for him, moving away from Nebraska and getting something new, because in his situation with Nebraska, he just was not playing very well in close games, and I think that kind of became a pattern that's been tough for him to get out of. But you got him coming up from Nebraska. You got Deuce Vaughn coming back, which is a huge return. Deuce Vaughn last year, over 1,800 yards of offense, 22 touchdowns. Keep an eye on him. He is a very talented football player, probably the best player on this offense last season, and they got him coming back. This backfield is set, having him back there. If he can stay healthy, we could see over 2,000 yards out of him of total offense this season. He already put up nearly 2,000 last year with 22 touchdowns. So, he is he's a sneaky player. Not many people talk about him, but he is very talented, to say the least. Joe Irvin's transferring out, your second running back from last season. He put up 300 yards, but you got, even the receiving core looks pretty good. You got Phil Brooks coming back. You also got Malik Nowell's coming back. Your top 2 wideouts are coming back for next season. Phil Brooks over 500 yards last season, and if you look at Nowell's, on the flip side, he put up just over 500 yards of total offense, 400 yards of receiving. So, and of course, your second in receiving from last season, tight end Daniel Imaturebe, he is not coming back. So, You do lose him. He put up 300 yards of receiving last year, 2 touchdowns. So technically he was your third actually for receiving on the season, even though League Niles was the second wideout on this team. You lose 3 on the offensive line. So the offensive line does lose a couple. You lose 2 on the defensive line, 1 linebacker, and 3 in the secondary. So you lose 6 starters, 6 of your key players on the defense. So defensively, there's a couple of holes to fill. The offensive line is a bit of a concern, but the skill players look, just fine in my opinion. Adrian Martinez, he's got definitely some big upside, I think. The backfield is fantastic with Deuce Vaughn. You lose Deuce Vaughn, though, that's going to put a huge dent. He's got to stay healthy. That is, he is a crucial player to this offense. Just looking at how big of an impact he was last season. I'm not saying I definitely hope he stays healthy, but that's just a huge thing. Is because of how crucial of a player he is. The receiving core looks pretty good. Once again, you're losing a couple on defense, but everyone loses a couple on defense. So, brings to the question: is this team a potential dark horse Big 12 contender in the 2022 season? I do think the Big 12 is a wide open conference going into next season. There are, I think, 4 teams in particular that I'm really looking at to being big contenders in that conference, and those teams are Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas, and Kansas State. Yes, I do not think Baylor is going to be that good next season. I think Baylor is going to fall off a bit. And so K-State, I think K-State's going to be up there, potentially the dark horse of those 4. Everyone's talking about Texas and, Oklahoma State, and, who knows, even OU could have a good season, even though they're having some significant changes as well. So it's a very interesting conference, and honestly, it's wide open. Honestly, once again, those 4 teams in particular that I just mentioned, they're all very able to win the conference this season. But looking at your transfer portal and recruiting going into next season, of course, you got Will Honus coming in, linebacker from Nebraska. Then you do lose a few players there. Justin Gardner, defensive back. You lose Marvin Martin, safety, off to South Alabama. Tyrone Tileni, defensive lineman's off to USC. Joe Irvin's off to Middle Tennessee State. Wayne Jones is in the transfer portal. You bring in Joshua Hayes, defensive back from Virginia, and you lose Amaris Brown, safety, to South Florida. Recruiting wise, not terrible, but at the same time, not very good. 63rd in the nation, 9th in the Big 12. You got no 4 stars or 5 stars, but you got 17 3 stars coming in. So you got a lot of 3 stars coming in for next season. But see, at transfer portal and recruiting, you've landed a couple of transfers that are going to change this team. I don't know for the better or for the worse, but recruiting wise, it's been okay. So I feel like this team, though, looking into the future, I feel like 2022 could definitely be K-State's year. This is their. I think this is going to be the team. If it's going to be any team that I've seen in the past few years to definitely make a run at a Big 12 title, it's going to be this one, I think. The Big 12, as wide open as it is, K-State gets a couple of huge wins against some of the big contenders. We could see this team be a big time dark horse contender in the Big 12. But looking at your schedule now, going into next season, we got South Dakota on September 3rd, the first game of the season there. And then Missouri coming to town. That'll be an interesting matchup. Former Big 12 opponents there. And then we see Tulane on the 17th, and then Oklahoma on the road on the 24th for the first conference game, and it's a tough one on the road. Texas Tech starts off November, Iowa State on the road, TCU on the road after the bye, Oklahoma State coming to town to finish out October. Then in November we got Texas, Baylor on the road, West Virginia on the road, and then Kansas to finish out the season. So looking at September here, South Dakota, I'm going to say it's an easy win. FCS opponent, you should take care of them. Missouri, I'm going to put that one in a close win. I do want to put that game in yellow, but I will favor K-State there. I think that game's going to tell a lot about how this team is going to be next season. If you lose to Missouri at home, which Missouri is a team that I see kind of in the bottom quarter of the SEC this season, even though Missouri does have some experience, so do not sleep on that matchup. But you got them at home. I feel like you do win that matchup there, and that'd be a good tune-up matchup to get ready for the season. You beat Tulane the next week, then Oklahoma on the road. I do want to favor OU in that matchup there. Even though K-State has given Oklahoma some troubles in the past, I do think Oklahoma pulls it out in the end, even though it is pretty early on in the season, so potentially OU's changes could come back to bite a bit, and Kansas State's experience does end up helping them get the win. But in the end, still going to pick the Sooners there. So 3-1 heading into October. Texas Tech at home, I'm going to put that one as a close one, but you beat them. Iowa State on the road and TCU on the road. Both games are extremely winnable. You lost Iowa State last season in what was kind of a confusing loss, and going on the road there, I do want to favor Iowa State in that matchup, even though I do think, the Cyclones, they'll be okay next season. Maybe 6 to 8 wins. I'd say 8 wins max for the Cyclones. So it'll be a decent team, not a great team, but going on the road there, I do think it's close. But you take a loss, and then TCU, I was kind of on the fence about that too. Honestly, this is a team that I feel like, Adrian Martinez, if this is the same Adrian Martinez that we saw last season, those road close games are going to be a challenge. Adrian Martinez did not play very well on the road last season, and especially in those close game situations. If you look at, I could go on and on about his games from last season, but those were his games where, even some of his home matchups just were not good in the close game situations. So we'll see if he can fix that. If he can fix that, you could definitely beat Iowa State and TCU. But in this situation, in this scenario, I'm going to put both of those as losses. Then Oklahoma State, close one, but you knock off the Cowboys there. You beat Oklahoma State. So you got them at home, and it may not make very much sense for me to pick Oklahoma State versus Iowa State and TCU. But those two road games, I do think, going on the road, I think is going to be, it's been a challenge for Adrian Martinez, and I do think those two games there are close, but losses. So 5-3 heading into November. You got Texas at home. You beat them. Texas next season, I don't think is going to be quite as good as some are expecting. I think Texas is in that 8 to 10 win range. They had 5 wins last season. I don't expect Quinn Ewers to completely change around everything. But then you got Baylor on the road. I do want to favor the Bears there. It's a road matchup. I will favor Baylor, and then West Virginia on the road. I'll favor Kansas State in that matchup to get the win, even though West Virginia, they could be a decent team next season. And then you got Kansas at home to finish out the season. Easy wins. You got 8-4 for your record next year. I think 8 wins is very reasonable, but once again, this team has got the ceiling to be a 9-11 win team next season. I really do believe. But that being said, let me know your thoughts and comments below on K-State, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.